Get your screaming brat out of my pool before I do it for you." Her voice cracked across the water like a whip. Claudia Marin, president of our HOA board and self-declared guardian of community standards, stood at the pool's edge, her nails digging into a clipboard as if authority itself had texture. The veins in her neck bulged as she leaned toward my 3-year-old daughter, Ava, who was coughing and terrified, water rippling around her small body. Then Claudia did what no civilized person should ever do. She grabbed my child by the neck and yanked her up like she was pulling a weed from her perfect lawn. For a second, the world went silent, except for Ava's choked gasp. The sun glared off the pool tiles, every reflection a blade in my eyes. People froze, unsure if they were watching a tantrum or an assault. Claudia's lips curled as she hissed about unsupervised minors. She didn't see me until I was halfway across the deck. I didn't yell, I didn't run. I just said, low enough for her to hear it over her own righteousness, "You just assaulted the wrong child." Her smirk faltered, just for a breath. I took Ava into my arms, felt her trembling, her heartbeat fluttering against my chest. Claudia tried to recover, straightening her blazer like nothing had happened. "We have rules, Mr. Rourke. Maybe learn them before accusing the HOA of wrongdoing." That was her mistake, using the word wrongdoing in front of me. If you've ever seen a moment so vile you felt your pulse change, hit subscribe right now. Because this was the day everything in Willow Trace cracked open, and I want you to remember exactly how it started. My name's Ethan Rourke. I'm a single father, a former Marine MP, and currently director of the city's law enforcement training division. In short, I train the officers who decide whether people like Claudia walk free or face a courtroom. She didn't know that yet, but she would. I wasn't supposed to be there that afternoon. My sitter had texted that Ava wanted to show her big swim to the pool guard, and I'd stop by after a meeting downtown. The pool had always been our safe place, where Ava learned to kick, laugh, and forget her mother's absence. My late wife, Nora, used to say the water made Ava brave. When Nora died, I promised my daughter she'd never lose that courage, not even when the world tried to take it from her. That's why I bought this house, our home by the lake, where Nora had dreamed of family summers. The HOA brochure had promised quiet living and safety for families. They just never said who they meant by families. Claudia's reign had already turned our community into a dictatorship of appearances. She fined neighbors for hanging Christmas lights 2 days early, banned colored flower pots, even threatened to tow a veteran's pickup for non-compliance with aesthetic uniformity. Every homeowner feared her emails, the kind written like legal summonses. I'd kept my distance. I'd told myself not to get involved until she put her hands on my child. She barked something about reporting me to the board. I remember watching her lips move but not hearing the words. All I could see was the red mark on Ava's neck, the tremor in her tiny jaw as she tried to hold back tears. I wrapped a towel around her and said, "We're leaving." Then I looked back at Claudia. "You might want to check who you're threatening before you write that report." For the first time, she blinked, confused, defensive. Her clipboard lowered just enough to show the hesitation she hated showing anyone. She thought she'd won again, that her rules made her untouchable. She didn't understand that I wrote rules for a living. I enforced them. As we walked out, Ava's wet keycard slipped from my hand and landed beside the pool gate. Claudia's assistant scurried over, picked it up, and dropped it in the trash. "Access revoked," she said, voice smug. The gate's electronic beep echoed behind us, sealing the line between arrogance and war. In that single quiet moment, I knew I wasn't just another homeowner anymore. I was a father who just watched a self-appointed tyrant lay hands on his little girl, and I had an entire police department's worth of law behind me. When I buckled Ava into her car seat, she whispered, "Daddy, did I do something bad?" I told her no, but in my head, I promised something else entirely. I would make Claudia Marin regret the day she mistook my silence for weakness, because in Willow Trace, power came from fear, and I was done letting anyone scare my family. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was afraid, because I was calculating. Ava curled up beside me, her fingers still red where Claudia had yanked her. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it again, her face twisted in panic, her floaty bobbing in the water, the way Claudia's hand tightened as if she were swatting a bug. The next morning, I drove to City Hall, not to file a complaint, but to pull jurisdictional maps. If I was going to bring the weight of the law down on Willow Trace, I needed to know exactly which agency held legal teeth in that pool area. The HOA had blurred the line between private enforcement and public trust for too long. I knew what Claudia was doing before I opened my inbox. Her email arrived just after 9 a.m. A formal violation notice titled Endangerment of Minor via Unsupervised Pool Use. She copied 3 board members, a legal advisor, and the neighborhood watch coordinator. No mention of her own actions. Just Ava's presence without valid swim credentials. She was trying to flip the narrative, smear me before I could act. That's when I realized she'd done this before. Willow Trace had changed over the past year. The Andersons were fined into silence over improper fencing. The Dumont family sold their home after a 6-month battle over their service dog. And the Vargas kids hadn't been seen near the pool since their mother argued with Claudia about noise levels. The pattern was clear. Claudia didn't run an HOA, she ran a purge, and the community, out of exhaustion or fear, let her. That afternoon, I walked the perimeter of our neighborhood park. I needed air, and Ava needed a distraction. While she played near the climbing wall, I spotted an older man sitting on a bench near the trailhead. He wore a volunteer badge. Willow Trace Watch, David Lenz. The name struck me. I remembered it from the board emails. He was the HOA's maintenance supervisor, one of Claudia's longest-serving members. He nodded as I approached, but his eyes were cautious. Ethan, right? Yeah, you know what happened yesterday? He looked away. I heard things. Then you know what she did. David let out a tired breath. Claudia's not new to pushing lines, but touching a kid? That's another level. I waited, gave him space. Men like him don't talk if you push. After a long pause, he added, the board's too scared to call her out. She buries people in bylaws, files fake complaints to the insurance pool. I've seen her take down 3 families in a year. That was all I needed to hear. Claudia wasn't just overreaching. She was running a liability racket disguised as neighborhood decorum. If you're watching this thinking, that would never happen where I live, you need to subscribe right now. Because it is happening, quietly, legally, one email at a time. I thanked David, but I could see the fear in his posture. He wanted change, but he wasn't ready to lead it. That was fine. I didn't need him to fight. I just needed him to remember. As Ava and I walked back home, I noticed the new security cameras facing the playground. High angle, motion tracking, clearly HOA installed. They weren't there 6 months ago. Claudia was watching everyone. Every moment, every move. That night, I pulled up the HOA's website. On the Security tab, they boasted about their private patrol company, Safescape Partners LLC. But something didn't sit right. I opened the Georgia State Security Licensing portal, typed in the company name. No results found. There it was, my first crack in her armor. If Claudia was employing unlicensed security, she wasn't just unethical. She was operating outside the law. Victory Strategy Progress activated. The Department of Public Safety handles licensing violations. They don't just audit, they shut down operations and freeze contracts. I bookmarked the page, took screenshots. My hands didn't shake, not even a little, because this wasn't just about Ava anymore. It was about every family she tried to intimidate, every child pulled from a pool, every neighbor driven out over the color of a fence or the bark of a dog. Claudia Marin had built a kingdom of silence, and I was about to speak louder than she ever imagined. The next time I saw David Lentz, he was standing outside the HOA clubhouse, holding a clipboard like it might shield him from what he was about to do. It was a Friday morning, overcast and heavy with that kind of southern humidity that made your shirt stick to your back before you'd even cross the street. I'd come to photograph the newly installed surveillance posts around the bike racks for documentation, another subtle expansion of Claudia's reach. David spotted me before I spoke. His posture stiffened, and he angled his body slightly toward the door, like he might retreat at any second, but he didn't. "Morning," I said, keeping my voice neutral. He gave a small nod. "You documenting things?" "I am." I raised my phone. Security expansions using an unlicensed vendor are something the state takes seriously. You probably know that. His grip on the clipboard tightened. His eyes flicked toward the clubhouse windows. I kept going. Safescape Partners doesn't exist on the Georgia licensing registry. Claudia's got fake uniforms, fake claims, and real liability. You still maintaining those systems?" He didn't answer, but the swallow in his throat told me plenty. I pointed toward the utility panel tucked behind the clubhouse. "You wired those last quarter, right? Under direct order from her?" He looked at the panel, then back at me. "I don't get to say no much, Ethan." There it was, not denial, not agreement, just quiet admission. You ever wonder what happens when one of those cameras malfunctions? When a kid gets hurt and the HOA's insurance realizes they've been misled about licensed coverage? He sighed and leaned against the brick wall, the clipboard now hanging loosely at his side. "I've got 2 years left before retirement. Claudia knows that. She dangles my pension every time I push back." That was her game. Compliance through quiet blackmail. She didn't need to scream to control people. All she needed was your livelihood. "If she puts one more hand on my daughter," I said calmly, "I won't be filing a complaint. I'll be pressing charges, and I'll be using everything I've documented against her." David rubbed his jaw, fingers trembling slightly. His gaze never quite met mine, but it lingered near, like he was still deciding whose side he was on. "I didn't see what happened at the pool," he muttered. I saw the report. She claimed your girl was causing a disturbance." "David," I said quietly, "do you believe that?" His face cracked then. Just a flicker, but enough. A tremble in his lips, a twitch in his cheek like he wanted to say more but didn't trust the walls not to listen. "She's 3, I said. 3 years old, and Claudia had her by the neck." David lowered his eyes. "I've got a granddaughter that age, Olivia. She's got a scar on her lip from a tumble off her scooter. Every time I see it, I think about how fast things happen, how fast they can go wrong." For the first time, he looked straight at me. "If something happens again, I'll talk, not just to you, to whoever needs to hear it." That was enough. For now. As I turned to leave, he called after me, quieter than before. "Ethan, just so you know, Claudia's planning a vote next week to authorize additional patrols. She wants to expand night coverage. That'll give her more people on payroll and more cameras." "Thanks," I said, "but she won't get that far." That night, I added David's name to the log, not as a liability, as a witness, a reluctant one, sure, but his conscience was waking up. You could see it in the way his hands wouldn't stop fidgeting, or how his feet shifted every time I mentioned Ava. That kind of discomfort only grows, and eventually, it turns into action. I'd seen it before, in soldiers, in recruits, even in cops stuck under bad leadership. First comes the silence, then the crack, then the flood. David Lenz was cracking, and Claudia Marin had no idea that the man wiring her kingdom was already slipping free of her chains. The vote to expand night patrols was held 3 days later in the Willow Trace Community Center, a building that looked like a wedding venue on the outside and felt like a courtroom inside. Whitewashed walls, polished floors, folding chairs arranged in rows like pews. Claudia stood at the front, lips tight, blazer sharp, her fingers tapping the podium with the rhythm of someone who already assumed victory. Every meeting had the same flow. Short agenda, no debate, majority rubber stamp approval. This time, though, I wasn't just another silent seat. I'd brought a notepad, a state code book, and a calm fury that wouldn't blink. She opened with her usual preamble: security enhancements, family safety, protecting our values. Then she slid the real plan across the board: 2 additional guards, nighttime drone surveillance trials, and a discretionary budget to support urgent enforcement needs. No mention of Safescape being unlicensed. No mention of Ava. I raised my hand. Claudia didn't acknowledge me at first. She scanned the room, made a show of answering other questions, then finally sighed and gestured. "Mr. Rourke?" "I have a question," I said, standing. "Do these patrol expansions fall under a new contract or an extension of your existing agreement with Safescape Partners?" Her eyes flicked. Just a millimeter, but it was enough. "It's an extension," she said tightly. "Standard procedure. And when was Safescape's last license with the Georgia Department of Public Safety renewed?" A few heads turned, chairs creaked. Claudia's smile didn't reach her eyes. "We handle that internally." I held up the printout. "They're not licensed, not listed anywhere in the state database, which means every dollar this HOA has paid them is a liability, waiting to explode." She froze for half a second, then snapped, "You're out of order. This isn't a legal hearing." "No," I said. "But it's about to become one." Whispers sparked around the room. A man 2 rows behind me leaned forward. "Wait, what?" another neighbor asked. "They're not legit?" Claudia slammed the agenda folder shut. "We'll handle any contractual issues privately." Motion to proceed with the vote. I didn't sit. "If you approve this, every homeowner here is complicit. The moment an incident happens, and it will, the HOA's insurance is null. You'll be sued personally, not just as a board member, as a resident." That landed harder than I expected. People looked at each other. David stood at the back wall, arms crossed, eyes locked on Claudia like he was memorizing how far she'd go. Still, the vote passed, barely. 4-3. Claudia kept control, but she didn't look pleased. She looked cornered. After the meeting, I stepped outside and let the night air cool the heat off my neck. I wasn't alone long. "Ethan," a voice said behind me. I turned. A woman I didn't recognize stepped forward, mid-30s, dressed in scrubs, tired eyes, no nonsense. "My name's Marisa. I live on the North Cul-de-sac. You said something in there that hit me." I waited. "My son was approached last week by one of those so-called guards. Asked him why he was loitering near our mailbox." She pulled out her phone. "He's 10. She handed me the picture. Boy with a skateboard, backpack still on, looking stunned. The guard was blurred in the background. "You filing anything?" I asked. "I didn't think I could," she said. "I thought they were real cops." "They're not, and I'm about to prove it." She nodded. "Whatever you're doing, don't stop." I watched her walk away, phone still in hand, a different kind of fire in her steps now. That was the real shift. Not the vote, not the argument. The shift came when neighbors started realizing Claudia wasn't just strict, she was dangerous. Victory strategy status, escalating. The more she pushes her illegal enforcement, the more exposure she creates. And the more neighbors I can bring into the light. The state doesn't need noise, it needs proof. And Claudia just gave me her first major crack on public record. All I had to do now was widen it. The next morning, I drove to the county licensing office, not as a father, not even as a resident. I went as what Claudia didn't know I was, the man who trains law enforcement to spot fraudulent security operations before they spiral into lawsuits. The lobby was quiet, just one clerk behind the plexiglass. I didn't need a full report, just access to the public registry logs. 5 minutes in, I had what I came for. Safescape Partners, LLC, had filed a business license 4 years ago, but their security service license expired 18 months back. No renewal, no inspection, no clearance, which meant every patrol they have run, every guard they've deployed in Willow Trace since then, had zero legal standing. Worse, their insurance certificate had been flagged as inactive since the start of the year. I printed everything. Sealed stamps, time-stamped search logs, all official, all admissible. When you train cops, you learn something early. The badge doesn't protect the department. The paperwork does. And Claudia had built her little empire on sand. The records clerk leaned over and tapped one of the documents. "This your HOA?" "Used to be," I said. "Not for much longer." That afternoon, I stopped by the rec center, where the HOA had recently set up Community Safety Hour for residents, supposedly an open-door session with Safescape reps. There were 2 guards at a folding table near the vending machines. Black polo shirts, boots, radios clipped to their belts. No badges, no names. One of them was playing Candy Crush on his phone. I approached slowly, watching. "You the security contractor for Willow Trace?" I asked. The older one, maybe late 40s, glanced up. "We handle safety presence, yeah." "You got your state license on you?" He smirked. "We're subcontracted. Licensing goes through the admin." "Which admin?" "Ask Claudia." "Already did," I said, slipping the printout onto the table. "Your license expired over a year ago. You're operating illegally on private property and impersonating licensed enforcement." The younger one stiffened. "Hey, we're just following orders, man." I leaned in. Following illegal orders gets you barred from any future work. But walking away now, that gets you nothing more than a warning. They didn't say anything, but they didn't tear up the papers either. I left them with the printouts. Not for legal weight, just for fear. Fear travels fast in a hierarchy built on lies. By the time I got back to my car, I already had a message waiting. Unknown number. You're making this personal, Ethan. That's dangerous. CM. Good. Let her feel cornered. Discovery method for this part. Expert consultation and public records inquiry. That's how we fight abuse. Not with outrage, but with receipts. If you're watching this and think your HOA might be pulling the same stunt, subscribe now, because I'm going to show you, step by step, how to dismantle it before it breaks you. That night, I sat at the dining room table, every document arranged in perfect sequence. Licensing failure, insurance lapse, regulatory noncompliance, HOA misrepresentation. All signed, stamped, and backed by state record. My hands didn't shake. I wasn't angry anymore. I was ready. This wasn't just about Claudia grabbing Ava. That was the match. But the fuel was deeper. How many people had she threatened? How many residents had paid fines, endured threats, stayed silent, just because no one ever called her bluff? I called it, and now I was going to prove it. Step 1 was complete. Step 2, trigger the audit. The Department of Public Safety doesn't investigate on a whisper, but give them proof of unlicensed operators, misused funds, public safety endangerment. That's a different story. I drafted the complaint that night, not as a father, not even as Ethan Rourke, but as director of training for the city's law enforcement division. I signed it with my full badge-back title, attached every file. Then I hit send. No rage, no vengeance, just law. And once the state stepped in, Claudia Marin would learn what real authority looked like. The state didn't respond right away. They never do. But I knew better than to mistake silence for inaction. 3 days after I filed the complaint, I got the confirmation email from the Georgia Department of Public Safety. Subject line, inquiry logged, unauthorized security operations, Willow Trace HOA. That's all I needed to see. Now it was a countdown. But Claudia didn't slow down. In fact, she doubled her efforts. Flyers went up across the community overnight, pinned to mailboxes, taped to the tennis court fences, even tucked under windshield wipers. Community under threat. Beware false accusations. The letterhead carried the HOA seal. The closing signature was hers. She was painting me as unstable, a disgruntled homeowner, an angry parent, a man spreading misinformation. And worse, some of the neighbors were starting to believe it. It didn't matter that I had documentation. People see bold fonts and uppercase headlines, and they forget how to think. I saw it in their eyes when I passed them on the walking trail. Fewer smiles, quick nods, avoidance. That evening, I walked Ava to the community garden. It was supposed to be her safe space, rows of sunflowers and raised beds we planted together in the spring, a place where Nora's memory lived in the marigolds. But the lock on the garden gate had been changed. A new sign read, "Garden access temporarily suspended pending resident review." I didn't need to ask who pushed it through. Ava looked up at me, confused. "Daddy, why can't we go in?" I crouched beside her, steadying my voice. "Because someone made a mistake, and we're going to fix it, okay?" She nodded, brave, like her mother. That night, I opened a private Zoom call with someone I'd trained 5 years ago, a state investigator named Janelle Ortiz. She worked for the DPS now. I wasn't asking for favors. I was asking for clarity. "What's your read?" I asked, after she reviewed the documents I'd submitted. "Honestly," she said, "it's bad. HOA knowingly contracting unlicensed enforcement. That's an open door for liability, fraud, and criminal misrepresentation. So, when does the audit begin?" "We're already building the case," she said. "Once we confirm community funds were used under false pretenses, we escalate. You might want to stay out of the blast zone." I almost laughed. Too late. By the time I ended the call, I wasn't just confident. I was locked in. The victory strategy had now entered its critical stage, outside authority intervention in motion. But I still had one problem. Evidence disappears fast when someone knows they're under investigation. And Claudia Marin was starting to smell smoke. I needed something airtight, not just paper trails or expired licenses. I needed a moment on record, a decision, a command, a mistake that showed she wasn't just negligent, but knowingly reckless. And I knew exactly where to find it. The HOA board kept archived meeting minutes in the clubhouse library. Not digital, not protected, just paper, Bound, printed, notarized. They never imagined someone would use their own words against them. The next morning, I entered the library during posted open hours. Ava was at her daycare. I had 20 minutes before the clerk returned from lunch. I flipped through the binders fast but carefully. March, April, May. There it was. June Board Resolution, Item 6. Safescape Extended Contract Approved. Pending future licensing. Not active, not verified, just pending, which meant Claudia knew. That line changed everything. I took a photo, emailed it directly to Janelle. No message, just the image. She replied 3 minutes later. That's the nail. The state audit was now not just likely, it was inevitable. Emotionally, I should have felt relief, but all I felt was focus. The kind of calm that comes before the first domino falls. Because now, Claudia's empire wasn't cracking. It was time to collapse. By the end of that week, Willow Trace felt different, quieter, not peaceful, just tense, like everyone was waiting for something they couldn't name. The audit hadn't gone public yet, but people could sense it. Power trembles before it breaks. I was standing near the lake trail when I saw David Lenz again. He was sitting on the tailgate of his old blue truck, sipping coffee from a thermos, staring out across the water like a man deciding which bridge to burn. I walked up slowly. You heard the rumors? He didn't look at me. I don't need rumors. I got an email from Claudia last night. Said if I'm questioned about security contracts, I should refer to her lawyer. That's not protection, I said. That's obstruction. He laughed once, low and bitter. She doesn't see it that way, says she's protecting the integrity of the board. I stayed silent. Sometimes people confess more when you don't fill the air. David took another sip, then finally turned to face me. His eyes looked heavier, like the kind of tired that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from too much pretending. You ever try to ignore something until it starts keeping you awake? He asked. Every cop does, at least once. He nodded, as if that answer gave him permission. I need to tell you something, Ethan. Something I should have said weeks ago. I waited. He set the thermos down. Those cameras around the pool, the ones you mentioned in the meeting, they're fake. That caught me off guard. Fake? He nodded again. Empty shells, no wiring, no power feed. Just shells mounted to make people think they're being watched. Claudia wanted it that way, said real surveillance invited lawsuits. My mind processed the implication. So, when she told the board she was reviewing security footage after the pool incident, she was lying, he finished. There was never any footage. She had me install blanks to scare residents into compliance. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. You realize that means she fabricated evidence. He rubbed his temples. Yeah, I realize it now. He reached into his truck and pulled out a manila envelope. Inside were 3 printed invoices marked Paid in Full, each one billed to Safescape Partners, each one signed by Claudia Marin. But the vendor address? It was a residential home in Macon, her cousin's property. She's been funneling HOA money into her family's accounts, David said quietly. I found out when the checks started coming back, stamped from a personal bank. I kept the copies. I thought, maybe she'd stop. But she didn't. No, he said, voice cracking. She doubled down, and I helped her without realizing it. I was the one signing the equipment deliveries. She told me it was standard procurement. He looked down at his hands, fingers trembling. I'm tired of covering for her, Ethan. I just wanted to fix things, not lose everything before retirement. You're not the villain here, I said. You're the witness, and you're the reason this ends cleanly. He hesitated, then nodded, jaw tightening like a man forcing himself to stand straighter. I want to give you what I have, but you've got to promise me something. No publicity. I don't want my name dragged through this mess. I can protect that, I said. The state handles witness confidentiality when fraud overlaps public trust. Your name won't surface. He handed me the envelope. His body language said relief, but his eyes said guilt. He wasn't proud of this moment. He was surrendering to it. I didn't do it for you, he muttered. I did it because I've got to look my granddaughter in the eye. She's 6. I can't keep lying about what I see. That hit me harder than I expected. I placed a hand on the truck bed. Then do this for her. Let's rebuild this place so she'd be proud to visit it someday. He didn't answer, but he didn't pull away either. That was enough. As I drove home, the envelope sat on the passenger seat like a live grenade. Inside it was proof, not just of corruption, but of intent. Fake security, false contracts, financial fraud. The kind of evidence that doesn't just dissolve an HOA, it detonates it. I didn't take the envelope straight to the Department of the Public Safety. Not yet. Evidence that explosive has to be folded into something airtight, timed, layered, irrefutable. So I drove to the one place I knew I could work uninterrupted, the downtown police training annex, room 4C. It wasn't an office, it was a scenario lab. No windows, no distractions, just me, a whiteboard, a case folder, and a locked door. The same room where I taught officers how to recognize abuse of power. Now I was building a case against someone who made a career out of faking it. I spread out everything across the desk. David's invoices, the fake vendor address, the board resolution admitting pending licensing, the licensing database search results, my own photographs of the fake cameras, meeting notes, resident testimonies, and Claudia's flyers. All of it pointed to one central truth. Claudia Marin had knowingly used HOA funds to hire unlicensed, uninsured private security, while simultaneously presenting them to the community as legitimate law enforcement substitutes. That's misrepresentation. That's breach of fiduciary duty. That's fraud. But the audit team wouldn't be enough on their own. DPS could shut down operations. But to finish this, I needed to close the other side of the trap, the money trail. So I contacted someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Amira Klein, a forensic accountant who worked with me on a precinct corruption training module back in 2018. We didn't do pleasantries. I sent her the invoices, the vendor data, and the names on the checks. 10 minutes later, she replied, "Claudia's cousin has no business license. These look like pass-through payments. I can confirm embezzlement patterns in 48 hours if you need it fast." I told her I needed it in 24. She didn't argue. Meanwhile, I drafted my secondary report, not to the state, but to the HOA's insurance carrier. These companies don't care about petty fines or playground politics. But fraud? That gets attention, especially when coverage is compromised. The email included high-res photos, notarized copies, and legal annotations. I titled the attachment Active Exposure, Willow Trace HOA, Fraud and Enforcement Breach. By noon, I got the bounce notification that my submission had been escalated to the insurer's internal risk division. That was the moment the chessboard flipped. Up to now, I'd been the one reacting, gathering, building. Now the consequences were moving toward her. That night, I received a call from a blocked number. I answered. "Is this Ethan Rourke?" a clipped voice asked. "It is." "This is Special Auditor Alan Crane, Department of Public Safety. We received your complaint, your attachments, and a federal referral through the Office of Inspector General. We're opening a joint investigation with the Insurance Commissioner's Office. Site audit begins within the week." "Understood. We'll need resident access and witness contact. Can you assist?" "I've got both," I said, "and I'll be present." Crane paused. "You filed this not just as a homeowner, but in your professional capacity. You sure you want to be that visible?" "She put her hands on my daughter," I said. "I want to be seen." He didn't argue. Victory strategy progress. Locked. The outside authority was no longer just looming. It was engaged, confirmed, papered. Now it was about containment. Ensuring Claudia didn't preemptively torch the records or smear the audit before it landed. I printed off every critical file. I created backup drives. I stored them in 3 separate places. My house, the training annex, and a fireproof lockbox at a friend's firm. Then I printed a final packet, sealed it in a plain white envelope, and slid it under David Lenz's front door with a handwritten note. "If anything happens to me before the audit, give this to Auditor Crane. Thank you for standing up." He'd know what to do. Some people think justice is loud, but the most devastating kind is built in silence. 2 mornings later, I saw the first sign that Claudia knew the walls were closing in. The clubhouse bulletin board had been wiped clean. No upcoming event flyers, no pool notices, not even the emergency contact sheet. In its place was a single printed memo. Effective immediately. All HOA inquiries must go through official legal counsel. No board member is authorized to speak on record until further notice. Claudia Marin, HOA President. She wasn't hiding, she was digging in. That same day, her SUV appeared outside 3 houses in the neighborhood, each one owned by longtime loyalists, the kind who voted her policies through without reading them. I knew what she was doing, gathering her loyal board members, prepping them, warning them. But what Claudia didn't know was that the audit had already been greenlit. The Department of Public Safety had scheduled it for the following Tuesday, and the insurance commissioner's office had filed an internal flag against Willow Trace for suspected fiduciary fraud. They were coming. All I had to do now was make sure the neighborhood didn't look away. I needed a public event, something that would force Claudia into the open and set the stage for what came next. So I submitted a formal request to speak during the open resident comments at the upcoming monthly budget disclosure meeting held at the Community Chapel Multi-Purpose Hall. Claudia couldn't block me. It was in the bylaws. The moment she tried, she'd violate her own governance. She approved it. Probably thought I'd ramble for 5 minutes and leave. She'd forgotten what I do for a living. The chapel was packed, folding chairs down both aisles, a few residents standing in the back. Claudia sat at the front beside her secretary, wearing a tailored navy blazer, every strand of her silver hair pinned like a helmet. When my name was called, I walked to the front, holding nothing but a clipboard and one printed photo, the fake security camera David had mounted near the playground. I placed the photo on the podium. My name is Ethan Rourke. I live on South Maple Circle. I'm also the director of the city's law enforcement training division, and I'm here tonight to warn this community about a legal disaster in progress. People shifted in their seats. Claudia's jaw clenched. In June, this board authorized extended contracts with Safescape partners. But Safescape is not licensed to operate in the state of Georgia. Their insurance is inactive. The patrols they provide are illegal. A woman in the second row gasped. Someone muttered, "Is that true?" Claudia started to rise. "Mr. Rourke, this is not an appropriate... This is public comment," I said sharply. "You approved it. You'll sit." The room went dead quiet. I continued, voice steady. "These fake security measures, like this camera here, have been presented as real. That's deception. Worse, invoices show HOA funds were paid to a residential address in Macon tied to a relative of President Marin. That's embezzlement." Chairs scraped. Residents whispered. Someone pulled out a phone. "I've already filed a complaint with the Georgia Department of Public Safety. The insurance commissioner is now involved. There is an active audit scheduled for next week." Claudia's face had gone pale. "You're not a lawyer. You don't have the right to make accusations of fraud in a public forum." I looked at her. "You're right. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm not the one who signed illegal checks either." Gasps. Real ones this time. A man near the back stood up. "Is this true, Claudia? Were those patrol guys even real?" Claudia tried to recover, but her voice cracked. "This meeting is adjourned." But it wasn't, because one by one, people started standing, not shouting, not demanding, just standing. And in that silence, I realized something. This wasn't just about exposing Claudia. It was about reminding these people they still had a say in what happened next. Victory, strategy, progress, positioned. The public confrontation had happened. The community had seen the cracks, heard the accusations, and watched her flinch. Now the state would move, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The state arrived on a Tuesday morning, not with sirens, not with press, just 3 unmarked sedans and 2 clipboards, pulling into Willow Trace like they were here to fix a pothole. But I recognized the lead auditor, Alan Crane, from our call. Tall, quiet, the kind of man who didn't blink unless he needed to. The other 2 were from the insurance commissioner's office, dressed like accountants, moving like investigators. They didn't go to the clubhouse first. They went to the HOA record shed behind the tennis courts. A place most residents didn't even know existed. By the time Claudia figured it out, they had already taken photos, boxed up ledgers, and tagged files for transport. I watched from across the trail with David Lenz beside me. He wasn't wearing his maintenance badge anymore, just jeans, a windbreaker, and the kind of cautious relief that comes when you finally stop running. "You good?" I asked him. He nodded. "She's not bulletproof after all." Claudia arrived 20 minutes late in a red SUV, heels clicking across the pavement like she still thought the HOA badge on her blazer could stop a state investigation. She approached Crane, waving a folder like it might matter. "These documents have already been reviewed by our legal team. You're overstepping." Crane barely looked up. "Ma'am, we have a signed complaint, evidence of active fraud, and confirmation from your own meeting minutes that you continued operations with knowledge of licensing violations. You can provide your documents to the commissioner's liaison. That's him." She turned to the other man. "This is harassment. I want a formal hearing before any of this is publicized." He didn't answer, just handed her a sealed envelope. Subpoena. She stopped talking. Residents began to gather near the playground fence. Marisa from the cul-de-sac, Mr. Weber from the North Loop, even the Andersons, who hadn't attended a public event in a year. They weren't shouting. They weren't protesting. They were witnessing. That was the real power shift. One of the inspectors approached me near the park benches. "Mr. Rourke, we've cataloged enough to proceed with formal suspension of the HOA's security privileges. We'll file our findings with the state within 72 hours. Civil claims will likely follow." "And the insurance side?" The second investigator chimed in. "Fraud involving HOA funds isn't just grounds for removal. It's grounds for restitution. Board members can be held personally liable." I nodded. "Make sure David's name is cleared in your report. He came forward. He helped end it." They both agreed. Then I turned and walked toward Claudia. She was standing near the fountain now, boxed in by her silence. She saw me coming and lifted her chin. "So, this is what you wanted? To ruin a woman's life over a tantrum at the pool?" I didn't blink. "You didn't just grab my daughter. You lied to this community. You stole from them. And you tried to turn fear into law. That's what this is about." She laughed bitterly. "You think you're the hero?" "No," I said. "I think I'm the ending." She walked away. Not fast, not dramatic, just small. Later that afternoon, the HOA's website was quietly taken offline. Emails bounced. Claudia's name was stripped from the directory. An emergency notice went out from the interim board. Effective immediately, Willow Trace HOA leadership is suspended pending audit completion. All enforcement and security operations are paused. Residents are encouraged to attend the open forum this Saturday. The kingdom she built, on threats, fake cameras, and forged authority, collapsed in one sentence. That night, I took Ava to the pool, not to swim, just to sit. She dangled her legs over the edge, holding a new pair of floaties, bright pink with glitter stars. "Can I wear these now?" she asked. I smiled. "No one's going to stop you again." She didn't know the whole story. She didn't need to. But she did know this. Her dad kept his promise. By Saturday, word had spread past our neighborhood gates. It wasn't just residents showing up to the open forum in the elementary school gymnasium. It was people from the surrounding subdivisions, real estate agents, a Channel 7 reporter, and someone from the mayor's office sitting quietly in the back row. Over 100 folding chairs had been set out. All of them filled. Dozens more stood near the bleachers. Claudia wasn't there. Of course she wasn't. The letter of resignation she submitted, 2 sentences long, no apology, was posted on the projector like an obituary. But the meeting went on without her. A temporary board had been formed, headed by retired attorney Marion Briggs, who lived across from the tennis courts. She opened the meeting with a calm, firm voice. "We're not here to gloat," she said. "We're here to repair what was broken." I stood near the side entrance, clipboard in hand. I hadn't planned on speaking. My part was mostly done. But then Marion called my name. "Ethan Rourke has requested 5 minutes to address the community." I think we all owe him that. I stepped up to the mic, every eye following me. Even the camera light from Channel 7's crew flicked on. "Thank you," I said, voice steady. I wasn't sure I belonged here at first, not when we moved in, not after my wife passed. I just wanted a quiet place to raise my daughter. People leaned in. But over the past year, I watched something dangerous happen, not in some big dramatic way, but in little ways. One fine, one threat, one lie at a time, until the people who paid to live here felt like tenants in their own homes. I held up the printed invoices. "Your dues were redirected to a fake company owned by a relative. Your enforcement policies were handled by people with no legal authority, and your silence was used as permission." A few gasps. One woman near the front started crying quietly. "This isn't about politics," I said. "It's not about power. It's about safety. My 3-year-old daughter was grabbed by a woman who pretended it was about pool rules. That's what made me act. But I didn't act alone." I turned and gestured toward David Lenz, seated in the second row, his cap in his lap. "This man, who wired your lights, fixed your fences, and did the quiet work no one noticed, risked everything to tell the truth. Without him, this doesn't happen. David shifted uncomfortably as a few people clapped, then more. A full round of applause followed, quiet at first, then rising. He gave a small nod, but didn't smile. He didn't need to. I continued. You don't need a badge to do the right thing. You just need the nerve to stop looking away. I stepped back, letting the applause die on its own. Marion returned to the mic. Thank you, Ethan. As of this morning, the Department of Public Safety has issued an official report confirming unlicensed security operations, misappropriated funds, and active embezzlement. The insurance commissioner will pursue civil penalties. Gasps again. A few heads turned toward the Channel 7 crew. Marion raised her hand. But this isn't just about punishment. It's about restoration. We are forming a compliance committee. All previous fines are frozen. All enforcement activity is paused. And starting today, we invite every resident to be part of this rebuild. The applause was thunderous. After the meeting, people came up one by one. Some to shake my hand, some just to say, thank you. Marissa from the cul-de-sac brought her son. He handed Ava a juice box and whispered, You're brave. She smiled. You too. Outside, the sun was sharp, almost too bright. But for once, Willow Trace didn't feel like it was under surveillance. It felt open, real. Victory strategy complete. Outside authority intervention had led to full community transformation, public exposure, legal enforcement, structural reform. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was just surviving here. I felt like we belonged. The old HOA signs came down a week later, not ceremoniously, just one by one, pulled from the mailbox posts and trailhead notice boards by the maintenance crew under the interim board. In their place, temporary signs went up. Community restoration in progress. Your voice matters. Simple, but different. Ava and I were walking home from the grocery store when we saw one being installed at the corner near our house. She stopped and looked up at it like it was a mural. Is that because of you? She asked. No, I said. It's because of us. The Saturday Forum had changed everything. Residents weren't just awake, they were involved. People who used to avoid board meetings were now showing up early and bringing extra chairs. Marisa joined the compliance committee. Mr. Weber offered to review contracts going forward. Even the Dumonts, who'd almost sold their house last year, came back to the pool with their service dog by their side. Claudia never returned. Her resignation stuck, and after the audit concluded, the state confirmed her personal liability in the misappropriated funds. The insurance company froze her assets. Civil suits followed, quietly and thoroughly. No one celebrated her downfall. That wasn't what this had been about. It was about taking back a community that had been slowly strangled by fear and dressed up in regulation. I met with Auditor Crane one last time at the City Hall Annex to close the loop. The report will be archived publicly, he said. You did your part, Mr. Rourke. Most people don't. I had help, I told him. A witness, a few neighbors, a 3-year-old with a lot of floaties. He smiled at that. I read the incident file. You could have pressed charges. I paused. I didn't want Ava to grow up watching people get punished. I wanted her to grow up watching people fix things. When I got back to Willow Trace, the lake was golden with early evening light. Ava was already at the dock with her sitter, dipping her toes in the water. Her pink glitter floaties were on full display. No one told her she couldn't wear them. No one tried to tell her what color was compliant. David Lentz walked up beside me, holding a rolled-up blueprint. We're adding lighting along the trail next month, he said. Real ones this time. I triple-checked the vendor licenses. You sticking around? I asked. He nodded. I was going to retire, but maybe I'll leave on my terms this time. We stood there for a while, two men who had almost let silence win. David, I said, you did more than most. He didn't respond at first. Then, you gave me a reason. Ava came running up the hill a minute later. She wrapped her arms around my leg, grinning. Are we done fighting bad guys? She asked. Almost, I said. Just one more thing. I lifted her onto my shoulders and turned toward home. For the first time since Nora died, the air felt still again. Not in that heavy watching way Claudia had enforced, but in the quiet way a place feels when it finally remembers who it's meant to protect. If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now, share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from. Because sometimes it only takes one neighbor to say enough, but it takes a community to say never again.